What happened next wasn't fast, nor was it cinematic in the traditional sense. It was slow, almost clinical, like one of those silent demolitions where the building remains standing on the outside while everything collapses within. I felt the end approaching not through grand signs, but through the visible exhaustion of them. Harper could no longer sustain any acceptable version of herself. Michael could no longer pretend to be strong. And I was strangely calm. A calmness that didn't come from denial, but from the absolute certainty that I didn't need to do anything else. Harper lost control in the most predictable way possible, trying to appear rational while emotionally sinking. Her anger stopped being directed only at me and began to overflow into everything. Small gestures became explosions. Minor setbacks became tragedies. The man she believed she had won over became the center of a daily, constant, grueling frustration. Michael wasn't getting better. On the contrary, he seemed to worsen as he realized there was no one left willing to prop him up emotionally. And that realization made him small, needy, and irritating. It was in this setting that Harper finally understood I wasn't coming back. Not for him, not for her, not for any role that involved carrying consequences that weren't mine. And this realization didn't bring acceptance. It brought hatred, a raw, childish, desperate hatred. She needed me to participate in that chaos, so she wouldn't feel alone in it. She needed to share the guilt, the weight, the failure. She needed me to validate the illusion that all of it had just been a collective mistake. But it wasn't. It was a choice. Theirs. Michael tried one last move. No longer regret, no longer victimization. He tried to get to me through weariness, through pity, through distorted nostalgia. He tried to remind me of who I used to be, as if that were enough to pull me back. But the effect was the opposite. I realized then, with an almost cruel clarity, that the man I loved no longer existed. Or perhaps he had never existed in the way I believed. And that realization didn't hurt. It liberated. Their fall became public in an inevitable way. Not because someone spread rumors, but because maintaining a facade requires energy, and they had none left. Harper began to be seen as unstable, aggressive, difficult. Michael began to be perceived as fragile, dependent, problematic. The narratives crumbled. The masks fell. And I was outside of it all, watching from a distance, like someone who has finally stepped out of a fire and feels fresh air enter their lungs for the first time. The most revealing moment wasn't a confrontation, nor a confession, nor a plea for forgiveness. It was the final silence, the complete absence of attempts, the bitter acceptance that I would never be useful to them again. And there, in that void, I felt something I had never felt before: victory. Not a loud, flashy, vengeful victory, but the kind that happens inside, silent, definitive. The victory of one who survived without losing themselves. Harper was left with the problem she chose. Michael was left with the consequences he had avoided for years. And I was left with myself. Whole, strong, aware. I didn't need to scream, or humiliate, or hurt anyone physically. I simply refused. I refused to carry their mistake. I refused